Give it to Thomas, the freshman. Touchdown, Memphis.
Double coverage. Are you serious?
Welcome to the 2022 American Athletic Conference Football Media Days, coming to you live from the home of the conference in Irving, Texas. We'll be here all day to preview the start of the 2022 season, talking to all the coaches and players representing those schools. It is the time that we love the most as we get a chance to really dive into, ask all the coaches a preview as they get ready to open up the season here in just 35 days away. We'll be here all afternoon. Here's a little bit of a preview of what you can expect today and the schedule that will start things off here in just a little bit. We'll hear from the commissioner in a couple minutes. East Carolina will kick off our schools, followed by Cincinnati coming off the appearance in the college football playoff semifinals. Memphis, SMU, and Tulsa. We'll have a little lunch break, grab some food, and then be right back here at 2 o'clock Eastern time. That's when Navy, followed by Houston, Temple, UCF, Tulane, and South Florida, wrapping up our day. And all day, I'll be joined by this gentleman, Rudy Angolia, breaking all things down and give you a preview of what you can expect for the 2022 season. 35 days away. It's crazy just how quickly the summer goes. When we start talking about talking season, what excites you the most about today?
Excited, like you said, 35 days. This conference this year, the American, quarterback play excites me. 10 of the 11 schools have their returning starters back, so a lot of experience. And the team that doesn't, Cincinnati, right, has to replace Desmond Ridder. They get a transfer in Ben Bryant, who started his career at Cincinnati. We'll explain as the day goes on. And he had a great career putting up a lot of yards at Eastern Michigan, but he's back in Cincinnati. So quarterback play for this conference this year, I think, is going to be outstanding.
I'm going to throw out a word, parity, because when you look at the top of this conference, it is going to be very good, very tight. And it was already seen in the polls. We'll show you in the preseason AAC poll. One vote decided between number 1 and number 2. At the top, Houston, Dana Holgorsen in his 4th season there at number 1. Cincinnati, as we said, coming off that incredible season a year ago, loses a lot of pieces. But look at that, just one vote between the two, and Cincinnati actually getting more first-place votes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the media here. Houston's my pick, and I just think, with Clayton Tune, Nathaniel Dell, a wide receiver, and Dana Holgorsen went to the portal as well. He's got a lot of more receivers he's brought in. Cincinnati, we'll see. I think 9 players drafted from that team, Chris, last year, so a lot to replace. UCF, does John Reese Plumlee win the quarterback job there? A dynamic athlete. What a 1-2 punch that would be with him at quarterback, Isaiah Bowser at running back. So right at the top, a lot of parity. And then SMU, Rhett Lashley inherits a very good team.
Yeah.
So he's going to enhance stuff. So, yeah, this is going to be a fun season in the American.
When you look at the bottom half, is there one that might surprise you?
I'm always bullish on ECU and Mike Houston. I am, again, where they're sitting. I think they have them at 6. So, yeah, I like ECU. Again, of course, they made it to a bowl game last year, didn't get to play because it got canceled. So that's probably a little chip on their shoulder. And one that I would say watch out for, not necessarily to compete and win the conference, but South Florida, USF, Jeff Scott's done a nice job with the transfer portal there. He's brought in new coordinators. I think they're going to knock a few teams off. They're going to surprise a few teams in the conference this year.
And you mentioned quarterback play. We'll get to speak to a lot of them today. There's a lot of new faces, a lot that have gone to the NFL in this league. So excited to see who is going to represent. But coming up, Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, is going to join us, get a state of college football and the conference as well when we come back. 2022 American Athletic Conference Media Days. We'll be right back. In the CFP, what excites you as we look forward to 2022?
Well, first of all, great to be with you, Chris. It was the pinnacle, no question about it, making the college football playoff, Cincinnati, and all credit to them. I think we look forward to another great season. We've got a lot of good teams. We think we'll have a good shot at either the playoff or New Year's Day again. So it should be exciting. As you know, it's going to be a different conference next year, but this year we're pretty much the same as we were last year. We've got a lot of good teams.
Well, good deal. I know that you have a lot to say, so I'll let you take the floor.
Well, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. On behalf of the American Athletic Conference, I would like to welcome everyone to our 2002 Media Day. I want to thank Chris and Rini Ingolia for again hosting our Media Day this year. It was great to be with them last year and again this year. We appreciate the wonderful job you do, Chris, as well as Rini. I want to recognize and thank Mike Fitz, who's the president of Tulane University, and Gerald Turner, president of SMU, our board chair and vice chair, respectively, for their outstanding contributions to the conference. Their steady hand has helped guide us through some challenging times. I also want to recognize and thank Michael Kelly, our past AD chair, and Rick Hart, our current athletic director chair, for their important efforts in keeping our conference on a strong upward trajectory and at the top rung of college sports. Scott Draper, our vice president of football, has handled our day-to-day and strategic football operations with a firm, talented, and experienced hand. I want to thank him. Also, thanks to Chuck Sullivan and Leslie Ann Wade for organizing our Media Day. Leslie Ann does a great job overseeing our communications efforts, and Chuck does a terrific job overseeing our day-to-day operations. Shout out to Troy Dannon, Tulane's athletic director, for his outstanding work on the NCAA Transformation Committee and the Football Oversight Committee. We're proud to have him on those committees and appreciate the work he does. I also want to welcome two new head coaches, Rhett Lashley at SMU and Stan Drayton at Temple. We know they'll be great additions to our strong roster of coaches. I also want to recognize Chet Gladchuk, who will be joining the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. He's the first athletic director from our conference to be on the committee, and I know he'll do a great job. Today is a day to celebrate our football and to focus on our conference's 2022 football outlook, which, as usual, is very bright. You will hear from our coaches and players, of whom I am extremely proud. I myself, in my remarks today, feel compelled to address some of the key issues facing college sports. Never have so many critical issues swirled around college athletics at the same time. Realignment, NIL, name, image, and likeness, unionization, the transfer portal, FBS, the football bowl subdivision schools, conferences potentially splitting off from the NCAA enforcement function possibly being overhauled, the deliberations of the NCAA Transformation Committee and the future of Division I, the very future of the NCAA, and the future of the college football playoff. These and many other issues confront us, and I will focus on a few of these today, as our conference will be affected just like the other conferences. As we all know, realignment has again been in the news. It's sent shockwaves throughout the college sports landscape, has roiled the waters of college sports and continues to do so. It affected us last year and may again. We don't know. 3 of our members, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, will depart the conference in July 2023. We appreciate their important contributions to our conference's legacy over the past decade, and we'll enjoy having them compete in the American this season. Congratulations to Cincinnati, our AAC champion, on becoming the first G5. I don't like that label, but nevertheless, they were the first G5 team to make the college football playoff. That's a singular and historic achievement. Our conference has had great teams over the years who were not selected, and we always face long odds. But Luke Fickell's Cincinnati Bearcats overcame them and wrote a special chapter in our conference's history. Congratulations to Luke also on being named Coach of the Year by numerous media outlets. Congratulations also to Houston for playing in our championship game and enjoying a great season, including a bowl win over Auburn under Coach Dana Holgerson. We will be welcoming 6 new schools to the conference in July 2023. We are proud to add UAB, FAU, North Texas, the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, Rice, and UTSA to our conference, bringing us to 14 football teams, with Wichita State also playing basketball and Olympic sports in the conference. These 6 new schools bring energy, commitment, and achievement to the American. They will hold our banner high, and their competitiveness will assure the vitality of our conference in the years to come. UAB will, however, be without the coach who has restored their program in remarkable fashion, Bill Clark. I want to wish Bill well, and I hope he is back coaching sooner than later. He's done an unbelievable job. Finally, a shout out to Kenny Niumatalolo, who is our veteran coach, and I want to congratulate him on a thrilling Navy victory over Army at the Meadowlands in December. Our conference is strong competitively and financially, and we provide a memorable and outstanding experience for our student athletes. As I have said, we all know this is a new and challenging era in college sports, unlike any that we've ever experienced. These are unsettling times. We arrived at this place gradually over the years, And now we find ourselves suddenly at a truly pivotal moment. NIL, pay-to-play, the transfer portal, realignment, etc., all have conspired to create a perfect storm. While I have no doubt that our conference will successfully navigate the shoals, what will college sports look like in the future? What do we want it to look like? The amateur model we have embraced for decades is gone. We can't pretend that it still exists. But at the other end of the spectrum is pure NFL-style professionalism. And is that what we want? Is there a reasonable middle ground that retains the student-athlete experience and does not make our student-athletes employees or union members? I believe there is. I think we can work together nationally to stabilize the currently unsettled situation. We may need help from Congress in this, and I know there are skeptics regarding that, but it may even seem an oxymoron to be able to get help at this point from Congress, but I believe it is possible. But first, I believe we have to have a coordinated approach among the conferences, and more on that a bit later. The first thing I want to address is the talk about the FBS breakaway potentially from the NCAA. It's a key issue, and it's whether the FBS conferences, and all the FBS conferences, not just some, should break away from the current NCAA governance model and govern themselves. This does not necessarily mean abandoning all functions that the NCAA undertakes, but it does include rulemaking, operating the postseason, control of officiating, things of that nature. I think we have to look seriously at this. What about the enforcement function, you might ask, which is still fundamental to the collegiate mission? Can the NCAA or a separate entity handle that even if FBS governs itself in other areas? It's reasonable to believe that FBS football should be governed by committees comprised solely of FBS representatives. The FBS commissioner should have a major role in how FBS football is run. Football is clearly a separate and distinct entity within the NCAA and could benefit from its own governance structure. With the interconnection between the regular season and the college football playoff, it may make sense to streamline the governance process through FBS self-governance. This is going to be an ongoing debate in which our conference will clearly participate. And there's another aspect, though, that is worth mentioning. We have to be inclusive with respect to FBS. What do I mean by that? Autonomy is now becoming an archaic concept and has been for a while. In view of the NCAA Transformation Committee's work and with the power likely devolving to conferences, the autonomy designation and conference governance model is no longer needed. Disappearing along with it should be the Group of Five moniker. That label has been destructive. It should all be FBS. I've said it many times. The recent realignment of the past 2 years makes the autonomy concept and the accompanying Power 5 media branding even less meaningful than it was before. If all 10 FBS conferences are viewed equally in terms of branding, as I believe they should be, then upward mobility, a feature of our American heritage, would be a more realistic possibility. Yes, some FBS conferences will of course be more equal than others in terms of revenue, competitiveness, all the things that obviously matter. That's perfectly normal and acceptable. But actually having to earn a particular status or reputation would be a healthy development. I want to turn to the college football playoff now, which obviously is of very much on in the news and is very important. First of all, it's a shame that we did not adopt the 12-team 6-6 playoff expansion model last year, where you would have had 6 automatic bids and 6 at-large bids. It was short-sighted not to do so. It deprived hundreds of players of the opportunity to participate in an expanded playoff in 2024 and 2025. We will soon be back at the drawing board. We have heard that all options are now in play, that perhaps conference championships should not matter, and that all spots should be at large. I believe such a model would be a serious mistake. Virtually all playoffs in all sports reward teams for winning their leagues or their divisions, for being champions. The best playoff model features a balanced mix of automatic bids and at-large bids, which was the model recommended by the College Football Playoff Working Group. I understand that conference composition has since changed, that marquee brands will now be more concentrated in 2 potentially dominant conferences. However, while that consolidation may make sense in terms of money and TV deals, it does not justify adopting a playoff system that caters to such consolidation. With the 12-team 6-6 plan, we accomplish key goals. We affirm the importance of conference championships, that winning a championship does and should matter, and we create an FBS-centered model which will give access to the so-called group of 5 teams. We have an opportunity to create relevance for all 130 FBS teams and multiple conferences. It would be a mistake, a big mistake, to adopt a system that could largely exclude 3/4 of FBS teams. My open letter to college football earlier in the year described the rationale, or actually last year, described the rationale and merits of the 12-team 6-6 model. And the events that have happened since have actually strengthened the need for that or a similar model. A 16-team model is being floated, you've heard that, and now it's being discussed in an effort to provide more at-large spots. And that is something we should consider. There are some issues with it, of course, but I will be discussing it, that model, with my conference and my fellow commissioners. With significant changes to the composition of the Big 12 and Pac-12, perhaps even more changes involving those in other conferences down the road, no one knows, the 5+1 model makes even less sense than it did before, which to me didn't make any sense. We could just as easily argue now for a 2+whatever model based on the recent realignment. But of course, that would also defeat the purpose of a true merit-based playoff. So-called G5 conferences are now more similar to several of the so-called P5 conferences than they ever were before. And it is important that the G5 conferences have playoff access. An ultimate goal would also be relegating the G5 label, which you know I have abhorred for many years, to the dustbin of history. You know, we're all FBS. A case in point regarding conference affiliation is the fact that Houston and UCF were clearly playoff contenders during many of their years in our conference, as was Cincinnati, which actually made it last year. Those teams were not given the respect they deserved over the years. But now that they've signed a piece of paper, they're suddenly P5 and worthy of serious playoff consideration, according to various accounts I've read. Transformed by signing a piece of paper. It makes no sense. A 6-6 model, or perhaps an 8-8 model if you have 16 teams. I'm not sure 10-6 would necessarily work, but 8-8 possibly could, because we know that there's a strong desire for at-large teams. But that, as opposed to all at-large selections, will prevent any perception that the CFP selection committee will simply overload on so-called P2 teams because of brand considerations. Our conference will continue to be a force in the college football playoff room. We have meetings coming up in September, and will be a force for the good of the game as discussions continue. Turning to NIL and pay to play. Name, image, and likeness is here to stay, and it wouldn't be an issue. It's not a bad thing. It wouldn't be an issue if, in fact, it really was NIL, but it's not at the current time. We'll have to see how the collectives that have been set up will play out, and perhaps we can put some restrictions on them down the road, basically to ensure that NIL is rooted in a rational, fair market value system. Otherwise, NIL is simply paying to entice recruits and paying to retain current roster players, regardless of their true NIL value. As for paying players, I see that as a more existential challenge. Whether one thinks it is a good idea or not, it is where we seem to be headed. College athletics has never been about paid athletes, although benefits have been plentiful, and they remain plentiful, more than ever before. But forces now beyond our control are gathering strength. Whatever we do in the future, we need to avoid employee status and unionization, which I believe would be potentially disastrous. If payments to athletes are inevitable, perhaps a graduate student type system of some sort can be set up. I don't know, none of us have those answers yet. While we may envision, and perhaps what we can envision and perhaps can shape, is a national or regional collective bargaining system that does not include employee status or unionization. While supporting true NIL, I am not campaigning to pay players. However, if it comes to that, what we have to avoid is a state-by-state patchwork of pay-to-play or revenue-sharing mandates. California, unfortunately, may again lead the way in that. The increasing professionalism of our enterprise is obvious, and we have to shape a reasonable structure. Any approach to a national plan or to gain assistance from Congress should be coordinated among all FBS conferences and not done on an ad hoc basis by individual conferences. And however prevalent the financial aspects of the player and school relationship become, the non-negotiable part of this is that the games must continue to be played by full-time students of our universities who meet admission requirements and who make progress toward a degree. That is not negotiable. What is the point of college football if it becomes minor league pro football? If it's no longer tethered to academic pursuits? If the institutions simply lend their names and brands to a form of minor league club football? If rivalries are lost? If loyalty to teams wavers? And if fans no longer care as much? Will the sport be consumed by player negotiations over money? I have always been a firm advocate of the collegiate model. Not an amateur model in its strict meaning. That doesn't exist, and probably in many ways never truly did exist. But a collegiate model that has players as students, where they're not pros, where they still enjoy college competition, where agents and professional football are kept at bay for a few years. But we are entering a new world, and it is up to us not only to adapt to that world, but to shape that world and not let it be shaped for us. And to shape it so that college football and college sports still remain college football and college sports, that they're still recognizable. I don't know if we can keep what has made college football and college sports special, but we have to try. Turning to realignment. Realignment's been a constant for 30 years, perhaps even longer. Consolidation has been obviously the more recent trend. Conferences are voluntary organizations. We have to remember that. If you observe the exit bylaws, you can leave. We can lament realignment all we want, but we have to deal with it. Admittedly, it is a hard, unforgiving business. Trust is shattered routinely in these situations. Feelings are hurt. Relationships can end. Friendships can dissolve. And schools are often blindsided and left scrambling. Although one cannot take it personally, it is by no means fun. The realignment we have seen is of course driven by money and competitive positioning, which are two sides of the same coin. Looking out for the collective good, and not everyone would define the collective good in the same way, has unfortunately not been a hallmark in the recent history of conference motives or actions. And the realignment musical chairs, if you will, is evidence of that. That will not change, unfortunately, and we simply have to deal with the reality of it. Realignment has shifted our conversation dramatically. You don't hear as much about student-athlete well-being, loyalty to school, or goals that do not include conferences seeking the last dollar. The student-athlete may well be getting lost in this. The educational enterprise, while never in perfect alignment with big-time college sports competition and commercial values, had and has value. We should not be cavalier about its loss. The conversations at media days this year, I've noticed, have shifted almost entirely to marketing, branding, and further realignment. Student-athlete well-being is rarely mentioned. The quality and strength of conferences is now tied almost entirely to their marquee schools and their brands and to the last dollar they are earning. That now seems the only way that we evaluate them. Maybe it always was the only way we evaluated them. Nevertheless, the health of our enterprise lies in the diversity of competition. We are not the NFL. We are not consolidated in one league or two leagues, regardless of that trend. Our conference, for example, has focused on our performance on the field. And any marketing we've done over the years, the P6 campaign, for example, was based on our achievements. It would all have been fluff without the on-field success. We made our reputation by virtue of our performance. What can we do in the face of the recent conference upheavals and consolidation? Well, we can fight for a healthier, more equitable system on the various fronts that are still in play, that are still available to us. Among them, the college football playoff, NCAA governance, and important protocols that still remain, such as scholarship limits, which helps, obviously, level the playing field. Complete concentration in a few top conferences at the expense of historic associations and rivalries does not strike me as a good thing, but the caveat is that we don't know how that will play out with fan interest or competitiveness on the field. Nevertheless, the dismantling of storied and ancient conferences and the abandoning of ancient and historic rivalries hardly seems a positive. Something important is being lost. Let us not pretend otherwise. Money has always driven things, although maybe not as completely as currently. We cannot cry over spilled milk. A new world has been gradually dawning. It's now suddenly upon us, and if we still care about college sports, we have to make the best of it. The foundation of the NFL's success, the equality concept, has for the most part escaped college sports in the realignment era. So at this point, we should do whatever we can to enhance overall competitiveness. There are still things we can do. We want schools and people around the country to care, not just a handful of schools and their fan bases. This is going to get harder, but we must re-intensify our efforts in the areas still open to us. Difficulty cannot be an excuse. And I'm not criticizing those who've engaged in conference expansion. I can understand why it occurs there, and we'll talk about that, a bit later. But we still have to deal with it, and we have to deal with it in a way that preserves the health of college football. The way forward. We can all see that college sports are being professionalized in many different ways. Recent events demonstrate starkly that collegiate conferences shared geography, history, tradition, culture, and rivalries are now approaching irrelevance as they take a clear backseat to money, to the pursuit of the last dollar. The consolidation of the best marquee programs in just a few conferences is mainly a function of money, but along with the money, there is the related desire to be nationally relevant, to compete for championships, to succeed in recruiting, the lifeblood of competitiveness. And these things are also driving top programs to the two dominant conferences. Money trumps all, and as been said, money is undefeated. With the challenges facing athletic departments, with paying players a possibility down the road, it's understandable that schools will look to conferences with much larger annual payouts. Maintaining relevancy nationally is also critical, and conferences with the strongest financial position can clearly better provide that. As I've said, we can't lament this consolidation, but we also have to understand it. We can lament it, but we have to understand it. It's a new world that's been dawning, and it's been dawning for a while. The process simply has accelerated recently. How will this affect college football in the future? How will it affect fans, interest in the game? How will it affect the schools not in the two dominant conferences? Time will tell, but the decades-long charm of regional conferences and regional rivalries is disappearing. College football is entertaining and fun. Its popularity is clear and has been clear for some time. But will something irreplaceable be lost in this new world of super conferences and professionalized players? Again, time will tell. But creating a large group of second-class citizens would not appear to be a healthy development. Consolidation of the elite brands may well diminish everyone else. Competitiveness nationally could be lost. Media attention will increasingly be focused on a couple of conferences, if in fact these mega leagues can even be called conferences anymore. Nevertheless, all is not necessarily doom and gloom, and our conference is a shining example of that. The American has, against all odds, been nationally relevant for the entire decade of its existence, despite a noticeable lack of attention from the media compared to that given to the so-called P5 conferences, and also with far less revenue than they've had. Our conference has been incredibly successful, has thrived and achieved a great deal, including a CFP appearance no one thought realistic or even possible, and a national championship in men's basketball and multiple national championship in women's basketball. Our league also created, annual college football playoff controversy that was fun and energized college football. We remember those debates regarding UCF and then Cincinnati and Houston. Our goal, despite the revenue disparities and other advantages enjoyed by the now Power II conferences, is to remain competitive at the highest level, to continue to achieve a level of success no one expects. All the credit goes to our student athletes and coaches and to the administrators and alumni and fans who support them. Perhaps the future road will be harder and far more uncertain in the new world of NIL and loosened transfer rules and increasing revenue disparities. But if we redouble our efforts, if we recruit intelligently, if we use our resources intelligently, if we hire the caliber of coaches we've hired over our history, and if we enjoy the commitment and support of our administrators, alumni, and fans, we can far exceed expectations. I echo a quote by Edward R. Murrow. Difficulty is an excuse history has never accepted. If we are going to compete at the highest level, we have no choice but to meet and overcome whatever difficulties and challenges we face, even if they're greater than before. A reduced or diminished commitment goes against everything our conference stands for. It had been suggested over the past several years that we should set our sights lower. We have been told that we should know our place and accept a certain kind of second-class status and enjoy whatever achievements we can muster at a lower level of competition and commitment. The unfortunate G5 designation has fueled that attitude and fueled damaging perceptions and media inattention to our considerable achievements on the field and on the court and in Olympic sports, and to our considerable influence in the college football playoff and NCAA councils. Cincinnati would never have made the college football playoff, an historic and seminal achievement if we had taken that advice. We would not have appeared in 7 New Year's Bowls over 9 years had we taken that advice. We would not have won a national championship in men's basketball, multiple national championships in women's basketball, appearances in a men's Final Four and Elite Eight, and multiple Sweet 16s, among many other accomplishments, if we had taken that advice. I know I speak for my schools and their leadership, their student athletes and their coaches and their committed fans, when I defiantly say that we will never accept a reduced status. We may not always achieve our goals, we know the odds we face, but we'll continue to strive to be the best. We will not achieve perfection, no one does, but we will give ourselves the opportunity to achieve excellence. A quote from Michelangelo describes the code by which this conference lives. The greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. In summary, we're going to have another strong season. Our success has been phenomenal and it will continue. We had our first playoff team this past year. As I said, a remarkable accomplishment. We've appeared in 7 of 9 New Year's Bowls, as I said, and we've been extremely competitive. We have 59 so-called P5 wins over a decade. Our P6 campaign has been vibrant, but I'm not sure that the P6 designation will mean that much going forward. It will be better for us in the future to frame our goals as striving to be one of the elite conferences. I believe that's the approach we should take. It may now, be P2 and everyone else for media branding purposes, but we want to be known for our achievements, and I know we can be. Again, we want to be an elite conference as we have been. We have been challenged, and we have also challenged, and we've surpassed some P5 conferences, even with the marquee teams that they've had who will be departing. Now the field is leveled even more. As we approach our 10th year, we are established and stronger than ever. What will happen after this year when Cincinnati Houston and UCF depart? We wish them well. We'll pick up where we left off. We have quality incumbent teams, and several are now regaining their former strength. 10 of our 11 schools return their starting quarterbacks, and Cincinnati has 2 veterans engaged in a healthy competition. We are adding 6 excellent programs next year, all of which will thrive in our conference. They have already made their mark in their current conference. Looking ahead, we are well positioned. We are in 4 of the top 10 media markets. Our media markets compare very favorably to those of the Big 12 and Pac-12, for example. We will continue to be an elite conference with elite athletes who relish competing at the highest level. We will continue to attract talented, gifted, dedicated, chip-on-their-shoulder players. We will do this by continuing to hire good coaches, by competing effectively on the biggest stages, by continuing to take advantage of our outstanding ESPN TV exposure. And I want to shout out here to ESPN, which does an unbelievable job for us in college football. And they are the leader, and they have been absolutely terrific to work with. And also, we schedule intelligently, and we offer a quality education to our student athletes, something that shouldn't be underestimated. And we also offer thoughtful NIL opportunities, among many other things. I myself am looking forward to this season with a great deal of relish. I think it'll be a great one. I thank you all for joining us, and I wish all of our teams great success. Thank you.
Commissioner Mike Aresco, I appreciate the time, and especially during the ever-changing landscape of college football. I'm sure our media members have several follow-ups to everything that you talked about. Chuck Sullivan, the Assistant Commissioner for Communication, is going to facilitate that so the media members through Zoom can raise their hand. Chuck, I will let you direct who has the first question.
Thanks, Chris. And we'll go right to questions from, we'll start with Joseph Hoyt from the Dallas Morning News, please. Joseph, you just unmute yourself and ask your question.
I'm not hearing very well, Chris. I'm not hearing. No, tell.
Hey, Mike, can you hear me?
It came out, yeah. Chuck, yeah, I can hear you now, Chuck. Thank you.
Okay, we're good. First question is from Joseph Hoyt from Dallas Morning News.
Hey, Mike, good to hear from you. I want to get your perspective on the last year. Obviously, a year ago, you've had the dangers of losing multiple members to a Power 5 conference. This year you have, next year you have 6 more coming in, but also now you talked about the dangers of not only there being a Power 5, but a Power 2 Super Leagues. I guess from last year to this year, do you feel that this is a more precarious situation for the American, or do you feel more confident moving forward about the idea of where we are with realignment?
Yeah, thank you. I'm very confident, but I also understand that this is a very fraught time. There's no question that we face a significant challenge, and we're losing three. After this year, we're losing three teams that have made a huge contribution to us, but we are bringing in some schools that have already distinguished themselves. And I think the key to our conference is going to be continuing the same DNA, meaning that we want to compete at the highest level, that we have a great TV deal that gives us the exposure, that gives teams a chance to show what they can do on a larger stage, and ultimately they can be successful. I also think there are a couple of other things that I think are going to be very important for us going forward. First of all, I think we are much more like some of the other so-called P5 conferences now that you've seen this consolidation that I alluded to. But also, I think we can take advantage of high school recruiting in a greater way, because I think you're going to see more and more emphasis on the transfer portal, where we've also done very well because we're in the right places. You know, we're in Texas, you know, we're in Alabama, we're in Florida, we're in Pennsylvania, we're in other places that are football hotbeds, Oklahoma. And so consequently, student athletes who may not come to our schools initially want to come back home, and we've done very well regarding that. But I think if we have good schools, and if we recruit successfully and we do the things that we should do, we can keep our players, and I think we'll be very successful. I think there's going to be a range of competitiveness that I think will ultimately favor us. I really do believe that. And just because you have all the money in the world doesn't mean you're going to be as competitive. We've seen that with certain schools. We've seen that with certain conferences. So while I'm optimistic that we can do the same things we've done, we were given up pretty much for dead 10 years ago. Look what we did. Nobody expected that. So I think we can do it again. But it will be a challenge, and NIL will definitely be a hurdle that we'll have to deal with.
Okay, we'll take the next question from Mark Giannotto from the Memphis Commercial Appeal, please.
Hi, Mike. How's it going? Thanks for doing this. You meant you're talking about it a little bit there. The best three teams in last year and the teams that were picked top three in the preseason poll this year, the three teams that are leaving the conference after this season. I guess my question to you, how concerning is that? You alluded a little bit to it, and why do you think you'll be able to kind of maintain your spot in the current college football ecosystem when those teams leave after this season?
It's a fair question, Mark, but I would point out something that people could easily overlook and forget. Many of our teams have been extremely competitive in this conference. A few years ago, Cincinnati was 4-8, and they had a couple of years when they weren't competitive. And Temple had a couple of great years, really great years under Matt Rule and Chris. And then you had SMU the last 4 years doing extremely well. Tulsa was in our championship game a few years ago. I think Tulsa has defeated UCF 3 or 4 times, the last 3 or 4 times they played them. Last year, SMU defeated UCF. And I'm not denigrating the teams that are leaving. But the point is, Houston had a period after they had that great run in 2015 and 16 where they weren't as competitive, and other teams in our conference were. Memphis, people forget that Memphis was one of our key schools. If it weren't for that big win over Ole Miss back in 2015, we might never have started getting the attention we got. Memphis had those great wins in the Liberty Bowl against UCLA, against Ole Miss twice, against Mississippi State. Let's not forget that certain teams that have been down were up at one time. ECU, East Carolina, is coming back under Mike Houston. USF had some great years under Willie Taggart and the first year in Charlie's tenure, and they're coming back. So we've got schools that can do it, they will do it, and they'll step up. And that's why I'm optimistic. Yes, we're losing 3 teams that have been very valuable, but they haven't always necessarily been our best teams. Now, we applaud the great winning streak that UCF had, but they haven't been as relevant with some of our teams. But again, I don't want to suggest that I'm denigrating any of these teams. They've done a great job for our conference. These are 3 marquee teams for us. UCF became a national brand in our conference. Cincinnati's reached heights that they never reached before under Luke, and we love what that program has done. Houston has had great years, and these schools invest. Our other schools will invest as well, and the new schools, we've gotten a commitment from them to invest at a level they need to do. So, Mark, there's no question it's a challenge when you lose 3 schools that have been on top of their game and are really great contributors. But I think we've got others that will, in fact, step up.
Okay, we'll take the next one from Dan Tortora, please. Dan, unmute yourself, please, and go ahead with your question.
Mike, you spoke about the enterprise, and that's something that when I was at ACC kickoff last week, it's the same wording that Jim Phillips uses, the commissioner there. Just what you can say about how you define the enterprise and what we need to do moving forward immediately to preserve college athletics.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It's a great question. First of all, college football is an heirloom. College sports are an heirloom. And they've been handed down from generation to generation. There's something special. They developed in this country in connection with universities in a way that maybe they didn't in Europe and other places where things were more professionalized or club sports. So we've got something that it's been unique, and it's been unique because it covers every part of the country. And everybody in the country has been involved in it and has been, successful at some time or another. In college football especially, while we've always had the marquee brands and we've always had the great programs, there's been a leveling, and there have been teams that have stepped up, and there have been a lot of great teams that have competed. I think Jim Phillips, and Jim is a good friend, and I thought he made some great remarks at his media day, and he talked about the health of the overall organization. I think the diversity of competition is a good thing. I do lament the fact that we are losing the geographical conferences that once had, it created a certain mix in the country that was fun, and that, it challenged, regions challenged each other. People had their own styles. A while back, the ACC pretty much gobbled up the Big East, which had been essentially a partner. These things happen, and we've moved more toward consolidation. We know why, and we know that the forces that are pummeling college sports require that, you make a bigger financial commitment, and that's concerning. People just think that because these TV deals are pretty large, some of them, that that the money just keeps flowing. The money's used for so many different things. We provide so many things to our student athletes, including all the Olympic sports we sponsor that basically don't generate virtually any revenue. So, to keep the entire enterprise healthy, I think you have to have a level of competition. And that's why I pointed out in my talk that we have to look at the things we can still look at. We know that there's going to be this consolidation. We know the media is going to focus on maybe a couple of conferences. But it doesn't mean that we can't have a fair system with the CFP where everybody has a real shot, like we've had a shot recently. Maybe there's some other things we can do. We have to keep scholarship limits in a reasonable place. We have to do everything we can. There's no level playing field, there never has been. But we have to do everything we can to keep things competitive. And if we do that, then every nook and cranny of the country will care. You don't want just a few fan bases caring and the rest not caring. Sure, you might get some big ratings for the big games. I don't know what's going to happen. People love college football. But you're going to lose something valuable if 3/4 of college football isn't as relevant as it was. And so that's the challenge we face, Dan. And that's what I think we mean by the enterprise.
Commissioner Mike Aresco, we appreciate the time. It's crazy when you look back us sitting here a year ago, the ever-changing landscape of college football. But excited for the future, excited for what this conference is going to do this season. So appreciate the time. We're going to get to the rest of the schools, the coaches, the players that we all want to hear from. So I appreciate it.
Well, that should be the focus today, Chris. We really want to hear from our players and coaches, and that should be, again, what we really focus on. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Commissioner.